The call came at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and I almost didn't answer it. I should explain something first. My name is Adrian Cole, and at that point in my life, I had built a small empire out of talking to strangers. 300,000 listeners tuned into my podcast every week to hear me dissect grief, loneliness, and the small private rituals people use to survive being alive. I had a glass-walled studio on the 17th floor of a building in the Arts District, an apartment 2 miles east with a view of the freeway, and a phone that buzzed so constantly I had trained myself to ignore it. Sponsors, producers, my sister Mara, who texted in run-on paragraphs, my ex-fiancée Leela, who never called anymore, but sometimes drafted messages I could see her typing and deleting at 2 in the morning. So when the screen lit up that Tuesday, I wasn't looking at it. I was at my kitchen counter, half listening to a documentary about Antarctic research stations, eating cold noodles from a paper carton because I had skipped dinner during a 4-hour edit. The phone buzzed against the marble. Buzzed again. I glanced down expecting the producer. The screen said, unknown, no number, not no caller ID, not a string of digits, just the word unknown in the same font my contacts used, like the phone itself had decided to name the caller. I let it ring 4 times. I would have let it ring out, but something about the silence between the rings felt wrong, the way a room feels wrong when you walk in and someone has just left it. I picked up. Hello? The voice on the other end was mine. Not similar, not close. Mine. The same nasal hitch on the H, the same dry, careful cadence I used at the start of every episode when I wasn't sure yet whether the listener was a friend. And the voice said very quietly, Adrian, don't go to the studio tomorrow. Don't open the door for Mara. When the sky turns the color of a bruise, get underground. I am sorry. I am so sorry. I love you. Then it laughed. Not cruelly, the way you laugh at a funeral when something absurd happens and you can't help yourself. A small, broken sound. The line went dead. I stood there in my kitchen with cold noodles congealing on a fork and listened to the hum of my own refrigerator. My first instinct was to look around the apartment as if the person who had called might be standing in the hallway. My second instinct, the trained one, the podcaster's instinct, was to check the call log. There was no entry, not a missed call, not an unknown caller. The log ended at 6:14 p.m. with a text from my sister and began again at 11:51 p.m. with a notification from my bank. The minute the call had taken place did not exist in my phone's memory. I sat down on the kitchen floor, my back against the cabinets, my hands still wrapped around the phone like it might ring again. I told myself it was a prank, a deep fake. Someone had scraped my voice from the podcast. There were 1,000 explanations, but none of them explained why my hands wouldn't stop shaking, or why I had already decided, without quite admitting it to myself, that I was not going to the studio in the morning. By 2 a.m., I had listened to the recording 40 times. I had recorded it, of course. Not the call itself, which had vanished, but my memory of it. I sat at my home setup with the studio-grade microphone and the foam panels Lila had helped me install 3 years ago, when we still believed we were going to be married, and I narrated every word the voice had said into a fresh audio file. I time-stamped it. I labeled it. 11:47 p.m. unknown self. The act of professionalizing the panic helped me breathe. When I played it back, I listened the way I listened to guests who came on the show with stories of dead siblings or surviving cults. I listened for the seams, for the moments where a person's voice betrayed the shape of the lie they were telling themselves. There were no seams. Either I was remembering it perfectly, or I had imagined a thing so detailed it could not be imagined. I made tea I didn't drink. I opened the freezer and stood in the cold for a minute. I called my sister. Mara picked up on the third ring, her voice already irritated because Mara is always already irritated, especially with me. She is 6 years younger and a pediatric nurse at County General, and she has spent her entire adult life convinced that I am one bad week away from a nervous breakdown. It's 2 in the morning, Adrian. I know. Are you okay? I need to ask you something weird. A long pause. I could hear her shifting in bed, the rustle of the duvet, the click of a lamp. Go. If I told you not to come over tomorrow, would you listen? No. What if I said please? Adrian. Her voice softened the way it did when she was about to be cruel out of love. Are you drinking again? I haven't had a drink in 9 months. Then what is this? I told her. Not all of it. I told her I had received a strange call. I told her the caller had warned me about tomorrow. I left out the part where the caller had been me, and I left out the part where the call had erased itself from my phone, because I knew exactly how she would respond, and I was not ready to be diagnosed by my own sister at 2 a.m. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I'm coming over in the morning. We'll have breakfast. We'll talk. Mara, that's not a negotiation. She hung up. I stared at the dark phone screen and felt something cold press itself against the back of my neck. Don't open the door for Mara. I went to the window. The freeway was emptier than it should have been for a Tuesday. There were ambulances, 3 of them, sirens muted, sliding east along the overpass in a slow procession. I had spent enough late nights at this window to know what was normal traffic and what wasn't. I opened my laptop and went to the local news feed. A scrolling banner at the bottom of the page mentioned a minor outbreak of respiratory illness at a hospital downtown, the hospital where my sister worked. Sources unconfirmed. 2 staff hospitalized. The mayor would address it in the morning. The mayor would not address it in the morning. I knew that without knowing how I knew it. The same way you know a song is about to end before the last note plays. I sat back down at the microphone. I pressed record. I said into the soft hush of the foam-padded room, this is Adrian Cole. It is 2:43 a.m. on a Tuesday. I think something is about to happen, and I want there to be a record. Then I sat there for a long time and didn't know what else to say. I left the recording running. I went to bed with my clothes on. I dreamed in the bruise-colored sky. In the dream, I was on the roof of my building. The horizon to the east was the color of a healing wound, that yellow, purple-green smear that skin makes before it forgets it was hurt. People were standing on every rooftop I could see. None of them were moving. They were all looking up. I woke up because my phone was ringing. It was 6:02 a.m. The screen said MARA. I let it go to voicemail. I did not feel proud of that, but I did it anyway. The voicemail came through almost immediately. I played it on speaker while I made coffee with hands that still weren't steady. Adrian, I'm leaving the hospital. I worked a double. There's her voice went thin. There's something going on here. They've locked down the 3rd floor. They won't tell us why. The patient I admitted last night, the one with the fever, he bit a respiratory tech. I'm not joking. I watched it happen. I'm coming to your place. Open the door, please. I don't want to be alone right now. The voicemail ended. The kitchen was very quiet. The coffee maker hissed. I picked up my phone to call her back, and as my thumb hovered over her name, the screen flickered. Just once, a frame skip, the way old film does when a splice has been made poorly. And then the contact name beneath my thumb changed. For 1 full second, it did not say Mara. It said unknown, and then it was Mara again. I dropped the phone. I want to be honest here, because this is a confession, and confessions are no good without it. I considered for a long, stupid second, not opening the door when she got there. The voice had told me not to. The voice had been mine. I had spent my entire professional life telling people to trust the small, quiet warnings that their bodies gave them, the ones that culture and politeness had trained them to ignore. And here was the smallest, quietest, most unignorable warning I had ever received in my life. And my sister was driving toward me through dawn traffic from a hospital with a lockdown floor. I went to the window. The sky over the east horizon was wrong. It was not blue. It was not gray. It was faintly the color of a bruise that had been there for 3 days. I unlocked the door before she could knock. She came in carrying her work bag and the smell of antiseptic and something underneath it that wasn't antiseptic at all. Her scrubs were clean. Her hands were not. There was a smear of something dark on the inside of her left wrist, near the pulse point, and when she saw me looking at it, she pulled her sleeve down without comment. Coffee? I said. Please. She sat at the kitchen counter and put her phone face down and said, Adrian, I think we need to leave the city. I poured her coffee. My hand was very steady now. Strangely so. The way hands get when the body decides the situation has finally become real. Tell me what you saw, I said. She told me. The patient had come in at 9 p.m. with a fever and confusion. By midnight, he was lucid again, charming even, asking the nurses about their children. By 3 a.m., he was screaming about a sound only he could hear, a ringing, a voice. He kept saying, "There's someone calling me. There's someone calling me from inside." By 4 a.m., he had pulled the IV from his own arm, walked into the corridor, and bitten a respiratory therapist on the face. They had sedated him. He had woken up. They had sedated him again. He had woken up again. The sedative wasn't working. By the time Mara had left, 3 other patients on the floor were showing the same symptoms, and the hospital had stopped allowing staff to leave their wards. "How did you get out?" I asked. She didn't answer. I noticed then that her work bag was unzipped, and inside it was a roll of gauze stained brown at one edge. She saw me notice. She did not look away. "Adrian," she said very quietly, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. I am still me. I am going to be me for as long as I can. But I think I'm going to need your help, and I don't think you're going to want to give it." Outside, the sky was getting darker, not lighter. The east horizon was the color of a bruise. The phone on the counter, my phone, the one with no record of last night's call, lit up silently with a single notification. "Unknown," it said. It rang. I didn't pick it up. Mara watched the phone vibrate against the marble, and I watched Mara, and the phone rang 7 times before it stopped. There was no voicemail tone. There was no missed call notification. The screen went black and stayed black. "Whose number was that?" Mara said. It said unknown. "Unknown numbers have numbers, Adrian." "Not this one." She closed her eyes. She did not look surprised. That was the part that frightened me most, that my sister, who had spent her whole life being the rational one, the one who corrected my exaggerations and rolled her eyes at my podcast guest's more mystical claims, did not look surprised. "The patient last night," she said slowly. "He kept saying his phone was ringing. We checked. There was no phone in the room." I sat down across from her. I did not want to ask the next question, but I asked it. "Mara, show me your arm." She pushed her sleeve up. There was a half moon of teeth marks on the inside of her left forearm, 3 inches below the wrist. The skin around it was not red. It was the color of a bruise that had been there for 3 days, the same color as the sky. "Who?" I said. "The respiratory therapist. After he was bitten. He came at me in the hallway." She said it the way she might have told me about a difficult shift, a long surgery, a code blue. Her voice was very flat. "I'm a nurse, Adrian. I know what a human bite looks like. I know what infection looks like. This isn't a normal infection. How do you feel?" "Fine. I feel fine. That's what's wrong." She told me then about the 3rd patient, the one who had been bitten earliest before they had thought to quarantine the floor. He had been calm for an hour, almost euphoric. He had talked about his late wife. He had described in great detail a phone call he had received in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. A voice he recognized, a warning he hadn't understood at the time, and then, mid-sentence, he had gone still, and his eyes had gone wrong, and he had reached across the bed and taken a nurse's wrist in a grip that broke 2 of her fingers. "How long?" I said. "From bite to turn? For him it was 6 hours. But he was old. He was sick. I don't know what it'll be for me." I thought about the call. I thought about the voice on the other end, my own voice, broken and laughing. "I am sorry. I am so sorry." I had assumed in the night that the apology had been for the warning itself, for the impossibility of it. I understood now that it had been for something worse. The voice had known what Mara would arrive looking like. The voice had known I would open the door. The voice had known I would have to decide what to do with her. I stood up. I did not know where I was going. I walked to the window and looked out at the freeway. There were no cars moving on it now. There were people, walking down the freeway in the wrong direction, against the long, empty lanes, in slow, loose clusters. Some of them were running. Some of them were not. From this distance, I could not tell which were which. Adrian, Mara said behind me, I need you to listen to me. I did not turn around. There's a clinic in the basement of St. Anne's on Bishop. It's small. It's old. They have isolation rooms there from the tuberculosis days. If you take me there and you lock the door and you leave, I might have a chance. Or I might not, but you won't have to be the one who does it. Mara! Look at me, Adrian. I turned. She was crying without making any sound. The half moon on her arm had darkened further in the 10 minutes since she had sat down at my counter. I could see very faintly a fine pattern of veins spreading outward from it, fanning toward her elbow like ink dropped into water. Promise me, she said. Promise me you won't try to save me yourself. Promise me you'll take me there and walk away. I promised her. I lied. I had no intention of walking away. The phone rang again. This time I picked it up. Adrian, my own voice again on the other end. Closer this time, less broken, as though the speaker had practiced. You opened the door. Who are you? You know who I am. Tell me anyway. A pause. The line crackled, and underneath the crackle, there was a sound I could not place at first and then placed all at once. The sound of a crowd. A distant, indistinct murmur of many voices. None of them clear, all of them moving in the same direction. I'm you, the voice said. I'm calling from where you'll be in 8 days. I don't have long. The signal doesn't last. Listen carefully. I could feel Mara watching me. I turned my back to her. Why does your voice sound like that? I said. Because by the time I'm calling you, I'll have been screaming for 6 days. The kitchen tilted. I put my hand on the counter to keep myself upright. Adrian, the voice said, the bite isn't always fatal. Listen to me. The bite isn't always fatal. The ones who keep their phones turned on, the ones who answer when the call comes, they go faster. The ones who keep listening to the ringing, who answer when the ringing is in their head, they turn within hours. The ones who don't answer last longer. Some of them never turn at all. What are you saying? I'm saying Mara has a chance. I'm saying do not let her answer her phone. Do not let her listen to the ringing. When she tells you she hears someone calling her, and she will, Adrian, she will, within the next 2 hours, you have to keep her from answering. How? Break her phone. Hold her. Talk to her. Sing to her. I don't know. Be louder than the call. Why are you telling me this? The voice on the other end was quiet for a long time. The crowd sound underneath the line grew louder, and underneath the crowd sound, I could hear very faintly a phone ringing, many phones ringing, a whole world of phones ringing at once. Because I didn't keep her from answering, the voice said, and I have spent the last 6 days walking with her, and she does not know me anymore, and I am calling every version of myself I can reach, and most of them have already hung up, and you are the only one left who picked up twice. The line went dead. I lowered the phone. Mara was standing in the kitchen doorway. Her face had not changed, but her eyes had. They were not wrong yet, but they were tilted, somehow, attentive to something that wasn't in the room. Adrian, she said, my phone is ringing. Don't answer it. It's in my bag. Don't answer it, Mara. It's not ringing in my bag, she said. It's ringing somewhere else. She touched the side of her own head, just behind her ear, the way you touch a tooth that has started to hurt. I crossed the kitchen in 3 steps. I took her phone out of her bag and threw it on the floor and brought my heel down on it until the screen cracked and the casing split and the battery skittered across the tile. She did not stop me. She watched me do it the way a child watches an adult perform a magic trick with curiosity, not alarm. When I looked up, she was smiling, very faintly. That won't be enough, she said. Her voice had a small new music in it that had not been there before. But it was kind of you to try. We had to get out of the building. I knew this with the clarity of someone who had run out of better ideas. The east-facing windows were already showing a sky that was no longer a sky. The freeway crowd was no longer moving in clusters. It was moving in a single mass now, and the mass was turning slowly in the direction of downtown. Somewhere in that direction, the hospital where Mara had worked was either burning or about to burn. Somewhere in that direction, my studio sat empty on the 17th floor of a building whose elevators I would never ride again. I made Mara sit on the couch. I wrapped her bitten arm in clean cloth, not because I thought it would help, but because I needed to be doing something with my hands. I packed a backpack, water, the protein bars Lala used to leave in my pantry, a flashlight, the charger for my phone, a knife from the kitchen that I knew I would not be able to use. I put my recording rig in last, the small portable one, because I am the kind of man who cannot stop documenting his own life even while it ends. I am not proud of this. I am telling you anyway. Mara watched me pack. Every few minutes, she touched the side of her head. Every few minutes, I made her tell me a story from our childhood. The trip to the lake when she was 9. The summer she broke her wrist falling off the garage roof. The funeral when our father died, and she had held my hand through the whole eulogy, even though she was the younger one. As long as she was talking, she was Mara. I understood without anyone having to tell me that this was the rule. "Where are we going?" she said when I zipped the bag. "St. Anne's. You promised you'd leave me there." "I promised a lot of things." She closed her eyes. "Adrian, if I tell you to leave me, you have to leave me. If I stop being me, you have to know." "I'll know." "How?" I didn't answer. I did not yet know how. I would find out. We left the apartment at 7:38 a.m. The stairwell was empty. The lobby of my building was not. The doorman Ernesto, who had worked there for 11 years and once told me his daughter had named her first child after a character on my podcast, was standing in the middle of the marble floor with his phone pressed to his ear, listening to nothing. His mouth was open. His eyes were open. I called his name. He did not turn. I called it again. He turned very slowly, and when he saw me, his face arranged itself into something that was almost a smile, but had too many teeth in it. I pulled Mara behind me. We took the side door. The street outside was the strangest thing I had ever seen. Not because of the violence, there was very little violence yet. The violence was still gathering itself like weather, but because of the stillness. People were standing in the middle of intersections with their phones to their ears. People were sitting on the curb with their phones in their hands, listening. People were walking slowly in the direction of the bruise-colored east, and almost every one of them had a phone pressed to the side of their head. The few who didn't were running. I grabbed Mara's wrist, the unbitten one, and we ran with them. We ran west, into the wind, away from the color in the sky. Behind us, I heard a single phone start to ring, very loudly in the middle of the empty street, and then a second phone joined it, and then a third, and then I stopped counting, because the sound of every phone in the city ringing at once is not a sound a person can count. We made it 4 blocks before the first of them came at us. He was a man in a delivery uniform, his bag still slung across his shoulder, his phone clutched in one hand and pressed flat against his ear like he was afraid of dropping the call. He saw us. He smiled the doorman's smile. He ran the way a person runs in a dream, faster than a body should be able to, his free hand outstretched, his mouth open. I shoved Mara into the alcove of a closed coffee shop and turned and held up the kitchen knife, and the delivery man hit me before I could swing it, and we went down on the sidewalk together, and his phone fell out of his hand, and I heard very clearly the voice on the other end of his call. It was his own voice, and it was telling him, gently, where to bite. I don't remember swinging the knife. I remember his weight and the sharp animal smell of him, and the way his free hand kept reaching past me toward Mara as though I weren't even worth finishing. I remember the strange courtesy of his voice, still murmuring through the fallen phone, "Good, that's good." The soft place under the jaw like a coach narrating a workout. I remember Mara screaming my name, and the screaming was the most reassuring sound I had heard all morning, because if Mara was still screaming my name, then Mara was still Mara. When I came back into myself, I was sitting on the sidewalk, and the delivery man was not moving, and my hand was wet, and I was not going to look at my hand. Mara pulled me up. We left the knife. We did not leave the phone. I do not know why I picked it up, but I did, and I shoved it into my pocket with the screen still glowing. the voice still murmuring its tender instructions to a man who could no longer hear them. We made it to St. Anne's by 9:15. St. Anne's was a hospital that had stopped being a hospital sometime in the 1980s and become, by stages, a community clinic, a soup kitchen, and finally a kind of holy ruin that the city kept open because no one had the political will to close it. The basement still had the old tuberculosis ward Mara had described, 6 small rooms with reinforced doors and viewing slits, designed in an era when the medical profession had been less squeamish about confinement. A nun named Sister Imelda, who looked about 90 and weighed about as much as a folded coat, opened the side door for us when Mara knocked in a pattern I did not know my sister knew. "How bad?" Sister Imelda said, looking at Mara's arm. "3 hours," Mara said. "Come in." There were 5 other people in the basement already. A teenage girl named Priya, whose mother had been bitten and was in one of the rooms, screaming softly through the door. A retired firefighter named Bram, broad and silent, who had walked here from 2 miles away with a fire axe slung over one shoulder. A young couple, Theo and Ren, who said almost nothing for the entire first hour and held each other's hands so tightly that Ren's fingers were white. And Sister Imelda herself, who moved through the basement with the calm of someone who had spent 50 years preparing for exactly this, without knowing it. We were a group suddenly. I had not asked to be in a group. None of us had. But we were in one anyway, the way people are in groups in elevators and waiting rooms, in the moments after car accidents. Mara let Sister Imelda lead her to one of the rooms. Before she went in, she turned to me. She looked very tired and very young. "Adrian," she said, "if I start hearing the ringing again, I'll tell you. I won't lie to you. I know. Don't open the door if I lie. Mara. Promise." I promised. This time I meant it. The door closed. Sister Imelda turned the key in the heavy old lock and slipped it into her apron pocket and patted my arm once, lightly, and walked away to attend to the woman who was still screaming softly down the hall. I sat down on the basement floor and took out the delivery man's phone. It was still on. The call was still connected. The screen showed the duration of the call, climbing, 2:14:08, 2:14:09, 2:14:10, and where the contact name should have been, there was nothing. Not unknown, not a number. A blank field where text should have been. I put the phone to my ear very carefully, the way you put a shell to your ear to hear the ocean that isn't in it. The voice on the other end was no longer the delivery man's voice. It was no voice at all, at first just the murmuring of a great crowd at a distance, the same crowd sound I had heard underneath my own voice the second time it had called me, and then slowly the crowd resolved into individual voices, hundreds of them, thousands, all speaking at once, all saying different things, all of them somehow in my own voice. One of them was saying my name. I hung up. Bram, the firefighter, found me sitting against the wall with the phone in my lap and asked me, without any preamble, what I had been listening to. I told him. I told him about the call at 11:47 p.m. I told him about the voice that had been mine. I told him about the delivery man and the soft instructions in the crowd sound. I expected him to look at me the way Mara had looked at me when I had called her at 2 a.m., the look of someone calculating how much help I was going to need. He did not. He listened, and when I was done, he reached into his coat pocket and took out his own phone and showed me the screen. There were 47 missed calls on it, all from unknown. "Started this morning," he said. "Around 5. I haven't answered any of them. Do you know why?" "My wife," he said, and stopped and started again. "My wife died last year. The first one came in with her name on the screen. The second one came in with my mother's name, and my mother's been dead since 2009. By the 4th call, I figured out whatever it wasn't them." He looked at the phone in my lap. "That one belonged to one of them?" he asked. "Yes. Throw it out. There's something I need to know first." He didn't argue. He sat down beside me, the axe across his knees, and waited. I appreciated him for that. There is a particular kind of strength that consists of letting another person make a bad decision while you wait to help with the consequences, and Bram had it. I took out my own phone. I set it next to the delivery man's. I opened my call log. The minute of the original call, 11:47 p.m. the night before, was still missing. I scrolled further. I had been scrolling past these entries for years without ever really looking at them. Birthdays, producers, my mother before she went into the home, my father before he died. Lila, 10,000 calls before we stopped. 3 more minutes were missing. Not in a row. Scattered through the log of the last 6 months. 3:08 a.m. on a Tuesday in April. 11:11 p.m. on a Sunday in June. 2:46 a.m. the day before yesterday. Times I had been asleep. Times I would never have answered. Times when apparently someone had called and I had not noticed, and the record of the call had been removed from the world. "How many on yours?" I said. Bram looked. He scrolled. His big, careful hands moved very slowly over the screen. 9, he said. "Going back to the day my wife died." We sat with that for a while. "It's not a virus," I said. "No," he said. "Or it is, and the virus is the call." "How do you stop a virus that's a call?" "You don't answer. People are answering." "People always answer," he said. "That's the whole problem with being people." The young couple, Theo and Ren, had drifted closer. Theo was holding his phone in both hands like a small wounded animal. Ren had her phone in a plastic bag wrapped in 3 layers of tape. They had been listening. "Ours started yesterday," Theo said. "We thought it was scammers." "How many?" I said. 11. Between us," Ren said very quietly. "I picked one up, just for a second. I just wanted to hear what they would say." "What did they say?" Bram asked. Ren looked at Theo. Theo looked at the floor. "It told me where Theo would be in 3 hours," she said. "And it was right." Down the hall, the door of one of the rooms began to thump. Not the room with Mara, the room with Priya's mother. The thumps were rhythmic, patient, the sound of a person testing a door rather than attacking it. Priya, sitting on the floor near the stairwell, began to cry without making any noise. I felt a buzz against my thigh. The delivery man's phone, which I had set down on the floor between Bram and me, was lighting up, not ringing, just glowing. The blank contact field was no longer blank. It said in small, clear letters, "Adrian Cole." It was calling me, from across 2 feet of basement floor. I did not pick it up. I want to be clear about that, because in the hours that followed, I would do many things I could not justify. But in that moment, I did the right thing. I let the delivery man's phone glow. I let it buzz. I watched my own name pulse on its cracked screen, and I did not pick it up. Bram took the phone, walked it down the hallway to the boiler room, and dropped it into a metal bucket of water. The bucket immediately began to hum, not from the phone, from the water itself. A low frequency, almost subsonic, that I could feel in my back teeth. Bram looked at me. We did not say anything. He carried the bucket up the basement stairs and out the side door, and we heard, faintly, the sound of him hurling it as far as he could into the alley. When he came back, his face had aged 5 years. "We need a rule," he said. We made one in the dim basement light, with Sister Imelda nodding at the edge of our circle, and Priya wiping her face on her sleeve, and the door down the hall still thumping in its patient rhythm. The rule was this: no phone stays in this building. Not turned off, not in airplane mode, not in a bag, not in a drawer. Every device that could ring would be carried out and disposed of. Every device that could ring and was already inside one of the locked rooms with one of the bitten, and there were 2, we discovered, one in Mara's room, hers, broken on my kitchen floor in spirit, but its battery still intact in my backpack. One in Priya's mother's room. An old flip phone the woman had refused to give up, even as she was bitten, would be removed when the rooms next had to be opened. When the rooms next had to be opened. We didn't say what that meant. We didn't have to. I went to Mara's door. I knocked our childhood knock, the one we had used through the wall of our shared bedroom, 3 short, 2 long. She knocked it back. Her voice came through the wood, calm. "What?" "I need your phone battery." A pause. "It's in your bag." "I know. I need to tell you. We're getting rid of all of them. The phones." "Good. How are you?" "I haven't heard the ringing in an hour. I've been counting." "Counting what?" Heartbeats. I'm at 11,400 and something. It helps. I rested my forehead against the door. The wood was cool. I could hear her breathing on the other side. Slow, human. Mara, don't. I love you. Don't say it like that, Adrian. Don't say it like a goodbye. It's not a goodbye. It sounded like one. I went back upstairs. I emptied my backpack onto the floor of the basement, took out the battery and the charger and my own phone, and added them to the small pile we were assembling near the side door. Theo and Ren added theirs. Bram added his. Sister Imelda, after some thought, added an ancient cordless landline handset she had been carrying in her apron pocket for sentimental reasons. A phrase she said with a small, wry smile that I would remember for a long time afterwards. Priya did not add her phone. I noticed it because she was the only one of us who didn't. And because she was sitting against the wall with both hands jammed into her hoodie pocket in a way that wasn't natural. I sat down beside her. I did not look at her. I looked at the door her mother was inside. You don't have to give it up right now, I said. She didn't answer. But you can't have it on. A small movement of her shoulder. If you keep it, I said, you have to keep it dead. Battery out, in a bag, far from your head. And if it rings anyway, and it might ring anyway, even with the battery out, that's the part nobody believes until it happens. You have to tell someone. She was crying again. Not noisily, just leaking. She was 14 years old. Her mother was on the other side of a door, 6 feet away, and her mother had been answered. It's the only voicemail I have of her, she whispered. From before, from last week. I closed my eyes. I understood then why the call had laughed. Not at us, at the situation. At the unbearable joke of being the kind of creature that records the voices of the people it loves and saves them in a box that can be made to ring against it. Keep the battery out, I said. Promise me. She nodded. I lied to the group about her phone. I told Bram I had counted them, and they were all accounted for. He looked at me for a long moment and did not call me on it. Maybe he had seen the way Priya was crying. Maybe he understood. Maybe he had a phone he wasn't telling us about either. We were already 4 hours into this, a community held together by small mercies and small concealments. We carried the pile out, and Bram buried it in the alley with a shovel from the boiler room. While he was digging, the sky to the east turned darker, and the first scream from somewhere on the next block reached us, and the door behind which Priya's mother had been thumping stopped thumping and started very softly to sing. The singing was the worst thing I have ever heard in my life. It wasn't a song, it was a tune, low and three-noted, a phrase that repeated and repeated like a bell that had forgotten how to stop. The voice was a woman's voice, Priya's mother's voice, but underneath it was a second voice, and underneath the second voice was a third, and on until what was coming through the door was not a person singing, but a crowd singing through a person. The harmonies were wrong, not dissonant, wrong. They went into the ear and did something to the part of the brain that decides whether you are safe. Priya stood up. I was not fast enough. She walked toward the door, not running, not stumbling, just walking. The way a person walks toward a kettle that has begun to whistle, and Bram caught her around the waist and lifted her off the ground and carried her to the far end of the basement while she screamed her mother's name and beat her small fists against his back. He set her down behind the boiler. He sat down in front of her so she could not get past him. He did not say anything. He just sat there and let her hit him until she stopped. Sister Imelda was praying. Not loudly, her lips were moving. She had her hand flat against the wall opposite the door, and she was praying in a language that wasn't English, and her eyes were closed. Theo and Ren were holding each other and not looking at anything. I was the one who realized the singing was changing. It started as one tune. Within a minute, it was two. Within 2 minutes, 3. The voices were coming not just from Priya's mother's door, but from outside the building, from above us, from the alleyway where Bram had buried our phones. The whole block was singing the same 3 notes, and the notes were not 3 notes anymore. They were a chord, and the chord was a chord I recognized from somewhere I could not place. and then I placed it. It was a ringtone, the default ringtone, the one every phone in this country came with out of the box, slowed down by a factor of 10 and harmonized across 10,000 throats. I sat down on the floor because my legs had stopped agreeing to hold me. Adrian, Bram's voice, from the other end of the basement. Adrian, your sister. I looked. Mara was at the viewing slit of her door. Her face was pressed against the glass. Her eyes were open. She was not singing, but she was mouthing along. I crossed the basement in what felt like one step. I put my hand on the glass over her mouth, as if I could press the song back into her, and she looked at me, and the look in her eyes was Mara. Still Mara. Mara fighting. I'm not answering, she whispered through the glass. Adrian, I'm not. I can hear it, and I'm not. How loud? Loud. What does it want? She closed her eyes. 2 tears slid down. She opened her eyes and the eyes were still hers, and she said, it wants me to remember someone. Who? Anyone. It says if I can just remember one person clearly enough, they'll come on the line. It says Dad is on the line. It says Dad is waiting. Adrian, it sounds like him. It sounds exactly like him. Our father had died 11 years ago, in a hospital bed, holding Mara's hand, asking for water. She couldn't get to him fast enough. She had carried that for 11 years. I had carried mine. Now something was using his voice through a door in a basement in a dying city, and I understood finally why the voice that had called me the night before had been my own. It had not been impersonating me to get past my defenses. It had been impersonating me because I was the person I loved most without admitting it. The voice was not a stranger pretending to be someone close. The voice was the closest person you had, used as a key. Mara, I said, don't remember him. I can't help it. Then remember him wrong. Remember him angry. Remember him snoring. Remember the time he wouldn't let you go to that concert. Remember anything that doesn't make you want him back. She laughed, a small, wet laugh, and for a second she was 9 years old and we were in the back of our parents' station wagon, and she was teasing me about a girl I had a crush on. Then her face hardened. She nodded. She stepped back from the door. I heard her, faintly, start to mutter a litany of small, ugly memories. Every fight, every disappointment, every flaw. The things our father had done that we had loved him in spite of. She was using them as ballast. She was using them to stay on the ground. The singing rose around us like water. Sister Imelda found me in the hallway 20 minutes later, after the singing had reached its peak, and then, strangely, leveled off into a steady drone, the way an air conditioner becomes background after long enough. You need to come upstairs, she said. Why? There's a man at the front door. I followed her up. The clinic's old front entrance opened onto Bishop Street, and the door had been locked and chained since the morning, with a heavy wooden bar across it for good measure. Through the small grated window in the door, I could see a figure standing on the steps. He was wearing a long coat. He had no phone. His hands were empty. He was not singing. He was looking directly at the window as if he could see me through it, although the angle was wrong and the glass was filthy and he should not have been able to. He raised one hand and knocked. 3 short, 2 long. Our childhood knock, Mara's and mine. Don't, Sister Imelda said. I know. He'll know other things too. He'll know how to ask. I know. The man on the steps lowered his hand. He waited. He had the patience of a thing that had nothing else to do. I went closer to the window. I should not have. I went closer. His face was, I want to describe this carefully, his face was my father's face. Not exactly. The way a sketch of a person can capture them better than a photograph. The eyes were not quite right. The mouth was a little too symmetrical, but the overall effect was so close that my chest closed up around itself. And for one terrible second, I forgot every memory I had been training myself to keep. He opened his mouth. Adrian, he said in my father's voice, let me see your sister. Just for a minute, just so I know. Sister Imelda took my elbow. Her grip was very strong. It is not him, she said. I know. Say it. It is not him. Again. It is not him. The thing on the steps tilted its head. The tilt was wrong. It was the tilt of a bird considering a worm, not the tilt of a person considering a sun. I miss her, it said. She used to sing to me at the end. I'd like to hear her sing again. I stepped back from the window. Walk away, Sister Imelda said. Not to me, but to the door. In the name of every dead thing that loved its children, walk away. The thing on the steps stood there a moment longer. Then it smiled, and the smile was almost right, but not quite, and it walked very slowly down the steps and into the street, and it joined the slow, shuffling crowd that was now moving past the clinic in a steady tide, and it did not look back. I sat down on the stairs. Sister Imelda sat down beside me with some effort, her knees popping. They send the ones you love most, she said. When the calls don't work, when the doors are locked, they send the dead. We've seen this before, you know. We just had different words for it. How long have you known? A long time. Not this, but like this. A grandmother in Krakow when I was very small. A man at a window who looked like my brother who had died. My grandmother did not open the window. She lived to be 94. She told me when I was leaving for my novitiate, child, when they come wearing the faces, do not look. Look at the wall. Pray to the wall. The wall doesn't lie. She patted my hand. Today the wall is the door, she said, and the door is a phone. The phone is the wall. Do you understand? I understand. We sat on the stairs and listened to the crowd outside and the singing in the basement and the patient, slow knocks that began again now on the back door of the clinic. Not 3 short, 2 long, a different pattern. Something only Lila would know. I did not get up. Lila came for me at sundown. I am writing this knowing that what I mean by Lila is not Lila. I am writing this knowing that the woman I almost married, the woman whose ringtone I never deleted from my phone, the woman whose handwriting was still on the spice jars in my kitchen, was almost certainly somewhere else in the city, alive, dead, turned, untouched. I will never know, and that the thing on the back steps of St. Anne's was a copy made out of my own memory and grief. I am writing this, and I still cannot quite believe it, because she looked so much like her, and because when she spoke, she said something I had not told anyone. The back door of the clinic had a small camera Sister Imelda had installed in 2004, and that, miraculously, still worked, fed to a black and white monitor in the office. Bram and I watched her on the screen. She was wearing the green coat. She had cut her hair. She was holding a takeout bag from the noodle place on the corner of our old block, the one we used to go to on Sundays. Adrian, she said, looking at the camera, I know you're in there. I've followed this sister. I came as soon as I heard. I brought soup. Bram looked at me. She brought soup, he said flatly. She always brought soup. That's not her. I know. You sure? Yes. But I wasn't, of course. I wasn't sure. That was the point. That was the design of it. There was a small, soft voice inside me, not the voice that had called me on the phone, my own voice, but an older one, the voice of the boy who had wanted all his life to be loved without conditions. And that voice was saying, what if it is her? What if you walk away from her now and it is her and she dies on the steps and you spend the rest of your life knowing? I picked up the radio Bram had brought from his fire station. He had jury-rigged it earlier to broadcast to the basement intercom. I keyed it. Mara, a pause, then her voice, weaker than it had been an hour ago, but still hers. Yeah. Lila's at the back door. Silence. Adrian? I know. What's she saying? She brought soup. A small, wet laugh. Adrian, she brought soup. She always brought soup. Oh, that's clever. That's so clever. What do I do? There was a long silence. When Mara spoke again, her voice had a new quality in it, a deeper exhaustion, and underneath the exhaustion, a steel I had not heard in her since our father died. Ask her, she said, what color the kitchen was. I didn't understand. In your apartment, the first apartment, the one she helped you paint. Ask her what color the kitchen was. I keyed the intercom to Sister Imelda's old door speaker on the back step. I cleared my throat. My mouth was very dry. Lila, I said. She looked up. Her face on the screen broke into a small, relieved smile, exactly the smile I remembered. Adrian! Oh, Adrian! Open the door! What color was the kitchen? A pause. Her face on the screen flickered. Not the screen, her face, like a poorly buffered video. Her smile stayed for half a second too long after the rest of her face had moved on. White, she said. The kitchen had been yellow. Not a nice yellow. An ugly yellow we had hated. We had argued about painting over it for 2 years and never gotten around to it. There was no version of Lila who would have said white. There was no version of Lila who would not have laughed and said that disgusting yellow Adrian, the one your mother said reminded her of a hospital. I keyed the intercom. That isn't you, I said. She looked at the camera. She looked directly at me, through the camera, in a way that the real Lila, who had never quite trusted technology, would never have done. She smiled, a new smile this time, not the remembered one, a wider one. It's close enough, she said. Isn't it, Adrian? Isn't it close enough? She set the soup down on the steps. She backed away from the door. She joined the crowd in the alley. She did not look back either, but as she walked, every single person in the crowd around her turned their heads all at once to look at the camera, and they smiled with her smile. I dropped the radio. Bram caught it before it hit the floor. You did well, he said. I almost opened the door. But you didn't. I almost did. That's not the same thing. He was right. I knew he was right. But the part of me that had almost done it was the part of me that I had spent my whole adult life curating into a podcast voice, a public warmth, a brand. And that part of me was now a liability. That part of me was the part the call had been built for. I went back down to the basement. I sat in the hallway between Mara's door and the door of Priya's mother, who had stopped singing now, who had gone silent, and I did the only thing I knew how to do. I took out my recording rig, which was the only piece of electronics still in the building, which Bram had let me keep because the microphone could not, by any stretch of physics, receive a call. I pressed record. I started to talk, not to the listener, not to the audience. To Mara through the door, about the yellow kitchen, about the wrist she broke falling off the garage roof, about the funeral, about every memory I could find that the thing in the wire would not be able to fake, because the thing in the wire had been built from the parts of me that were easiest to find, and these memories were the parts that hurt the most, and the parts that hurt the most were the parts I had hidden, even from myself. I talked for 3 hours. When I stopped, Mara was still breathing on the other side of the door. Priya's mother turned at 3:14 a.m. We had been expecting it. The silence from her room had gone on for too long. Sister Imelda was the one who heard the change, a single low note, almost subsonic, the kind of sound a person makes in the moment before they remember they are a person. By the time we got down the hall, the door was thumping again, hard now, not patient, and the wood was splintering around the lock. Bram was ready. He had been ready since noon. He had moved the heavy filing cabinet from the office down to the basement and positioned it 3 feet from the door, leaving a corridor between the cabinet and the wall just wide enough for a person to be funneled into. He had the axe. Sister Imelda had a small pistol I had not known she owned. Theo and Ren had crowbars from the boiler room. I had nothing. I had decided around midnight that I was not going to use a weapon again unless I had to. I had decided this not out of mercy, but out of an instinct I did not entirely understand, that the call wanted me to use a weapon, that the call had been guiding me toward it all day, that every act of violence had made the next call easier to answer. I do not know if I was right about that. I will never know. I am telling you what I believed. The door gave. The thing that came through it was not Priya's mother. I want to be clear about that, because Priya was watching, and because what I did next would have broken me if I had let myself believe otherwise. The body had Priya's mother's shape, and Priya's mother's hair, and Priya's mother's wedding ring. But the eyes were the eyes of the crowd, and the mouth was not making a face a human had ever made. And the voice that came out of it was not one voice, but the chord of every phone in the world ringing at once, focused down into a single throat. Bram did what Bram had been preparing all his life to do. It was very fast. Sister Imelda crossed herself. Priya did not look away, and I did not make her, because I understood, finally, that protecting her from this moment was a thing the call would want me to do. The call wanted us soft. Softness was the surface it could speak through. The thing Priya needed was not protection from the truth, but a witness to it. And so I stood next to her, and we watched Owen together. And when it was over, I put my hand on her shoulder, and she leaned into me, and she did not cry. She was already gone, Priya said quietly. She was already gone hours ago. I knew. I just wanted to wait. I know. Is Mara going to be like that? I didn't answer. There was no answer that wasn't a lie. We sat in the hallway. Bram cleaned the axe. Sister Imelda began in a low, steady voice to recite the names of every person who had passed through this clinic in her 50 years of service that she could remember. Not as a prayer, as an inventory, as an act of refusal. The call wanted us to forget our specifics. She was filling the basement with specifics, name by name by name, like sandbags against a flood. The phone in Priya's hoodie pocket began to ring. She had kept it. I had known she had kept it. I had let her. I had told myself I was being kind. I had been wrong. Priya took the phone out. The battery was still removed. It was ringing anyway. The screen was glowing. The contact name on the screen was Mom. She looked up at me. It's her, she said, but flatly. Not as a belief, but as a report. It's going to be her. If I pick it up, it's going to be her. Yes. And I won't be able to stop talking to her. No. She held the phone out to me. I took it. The plastic was warm in my hand. The ringing went through my palm and into the bones of my arm. I walked the phone to the far end of the basement, to the small grated window at floor level that opened into the alley, and I dropped it through the grate. The ringing continued fainter from outside. Then it stopped. Then it began again, louder somehow, even through the wall, and I understood that the call was no longer in the phone. The call was in the air. The phone had only ever been the doorway. I walked back to Priya. She was wiping her face on her sleeve. I'm sorry, I said. Don't be, she said. I'm sorry. I should have given it to you this morning. It wouldn't have mattered. It might have, a little. I think she was right. I think a little is sometimes all there is. I think the difference between the people who survived that night and the people who didn't was a series of a littles, a phone given up an hour earlier, a knock not answered, a memory held a little harder, a door kept locked a little longer. There was no large act of heroism available to us. There was only the small, constant practice of refusal. I went back to Mara's door. I pressed my forehead against it. I asked her, quietly, if she could still hear me. She could. I asked her if she could still hear the ringing. She could. I asked her if she was still herself. She said, for now. The call came for me at 4:09 a.m. I had been waiting for it. I had not known I was waiting for it until it came, and then I knew I had been waiting for it all day. The recording rig was the only electronic device in the basement. I had told myself all day that a microphone could not receive a call. I had been wrong about this in the way I had been wrong about everything else. The call did not need a phone. The call had only ever needed an opening. The microphone was on. I was alone in the small office where Sister Imelda kept her records. I had been talking to it, into it, narrating the night, the way I had narrated everything in my life for the last 14 years. I had been talking about Mara. I had been talking about our father. I had been talking about the yellow kitchen and the way Lila had laughed when we had finally agreed it was hideous, and the way I had felt when she left that I had lost the right to a kitchen at all. The microphone crackled. The pop filter swayed very slightly, as if a breath had moved across it. A voice came out of the headphones. It was mine. Not the broken one from the first call, not the practiced one from the second. A third voice, older, more tired than any voice I had ever made. The voice of a man who had been screaming for 8 days and had finally remembered how to be quiet. Adrian, it said, you did better than I did. I did not say anything. I waited. The reason the call works, the voice said, is that we are creatures who answer. We answer doors. We answer questions. We answer phones. We answer when our names are called. We answer when someone we love is hurt. The thing that found us, it is not a virus. It is not an entity. It is the shape of the answering, made loud enough to hear back. Do you understand? I think so. It cannot make us answer. It can only call. The answering has to come from us. That is the only door it can come through. Then why are people answering? Because most people, when called, will answer. That is the species. That is not a flaw. It is the thing that made us. It is also the thing that ends us. I closed my eyes. In the basement, Mara was singing very softly to herself through the door. Not the three-noted song, but a song from our childhood, an old lullaby our mother had used, and she was singing it badly on purpose in the wrong key to make sure she was still the one singing. "What do?" I said. "You finish the call," the voice said. "You answer, but you answer differently." "How?" "You don't answer with yes. You don't answer with hello. You answer with what you know. You tell it everything you remember about your sister. You tell it everything you remember that it cannot use. You speak until you are empty and there is nothing left for it to copy. You become uncopyable. Do you understand? The version of me that is calling you did not do that. The version of me that is calling you answered the way a man answers a phone. I said hello. I gave the thing the only word it needed. Don't say hello, Adrian. Say her name. Whose? You know whose. The line went quiet. I sat there with the headphones on my ears and the microphone 6 inches from my mouth, and I understood finally what the entire long day had been preparing me for. Not to fight, not to escape, not to seal a vault or break a generator or burn a building down. To do the only thing I had ever known how to do, to talk into a microphone, in the dark, alone, but for a reason that was not vanity, and to an audience that was not paying. I leaned toward the microphone. I said, "Mara." I said her name. I said it again. I told the microphone the call, the thing inside the call, the shape of the answering itself, about my sister. I told it about the wrist she broke and the funeral she held my hand through, and the way she had laughed at me when I called her at 2 a.m. and the way she had said it sounded like a goodbye through a basement door, and the way she had sung an old lullaby badly to keep herself sovereign. I told it the things only I knew. I told it the things I had never told the podcast and never told Lila and never told anyone. The small, unrepeatable specifics that made my sister and not an idea of a sister. Not a sister shape that could be filled with a crowd's voice. I spoke for a long time. I do not know how long. I have the recording. I have not played it back. I do not think I will. When I stopped, the microphone was warm. The pop filter was still. The headphones were silent. In the basement, the singing outside the clinic had thinned. The crowd had not gone. I could still hear them shuffling, still hear the chord of the ringtone in the air. But the chord was no longer aimed at us. It was aimed past us. We were no longer interesting. We had become, for a little while, uncopyable. I took off the headphones. I walked out of the office. I went to Mara's door. I knocked our knock. 3 short, 2 long. She knocked back. 3 short, 2 long, slow, deliberate, human. "Adrian," she said, "I don't hear the ringing anymore." I sat down with my back against the door. Sister Imelda came and sat beside me without speaking. Priya curled up against my other side and fell asleep within minutes. Bram, somewhere in the dark above us, kept watch. The east-facing window at the top of the basement stairs began, very slowly, to go from the color of a bruise to the color of dawn. I am writing this 6 months later, from a place I am not going to name. Mara survived. The bite scar on her arm is a ring of small white teeth that she does not cover, because she says we owe it to the people who didn't survive not to hide what survival looks like. She does not talk much about the hours behind that door. She told me once, only once, that what she heard during the worst of it was every phone call she had ever wanted to make and never made it, to our father, to a friend who died in college, to a patient she lost in her 2nd year of nursing, all of them ringing at once. all of them about to connect. She said she did not pick up because she could hear, underneath the ringing, the sound of a brother on the other side of a door narrating her into existence. Priya lives with us now. Bram lives 2 houses down. Sister Imelda did not make it out of the city. She stayed behind in the basement of St. Anne's with the people who came afterward. And the last anyone heard of her, she was still reciting names. Theo and Ren went north. We get a letter sometimes. Their handwriting is shaky. They are alive. The phones never came back. Not really. We have radios now, and we have one another, and we have learned that the most dangerous thing a person can do is answer a call from a voice they want too badly to hear. I keep one device. It is the small recording rig from the basement. I have not turned it on since that night. It sits on a shelf above my bed, and sometimes, in the small hours, I am sure I can hear very faintly my own voice inside it, still talking, still saying my sister's name into the dark. I do not pick it up. I am learning